Good afternoon, everyone. Major John Howell here. As I mentioned in some of my earlier videos, I was a physical education major. So I have a smooth brain. And I'm sitting with the Raven 6, Colonel Broyles, and we're going to discuss some of his favorite books about maneuver, sir. So I am here to learn. Let's get right into this. Let's go.
Well, what I want to talk about is in our next video, we're going to introduce the physical sphere of war. We're going to introduce move, strike, and protect. And that's where I really wanted to get into maneuver warfare.
Yes, sir.
However, doing that, I think it's important to have a conversation. Just where does my kind of love for maneuver warfare come from? Where are the key influences, and where do I kind of get all this stuff? So my maneuver warfare journey came from I went to SAMS in 2015 and 16, the School of Advanced Military Studies. And it was transformative. But I left there with really a passion for learning.
Sure.
I went to 7th Infantry Division, and I was working as a deputy G5, and I picked up a book. It was called The Art of Maneuver. It was written by Robert Leonhard about 1991. And as I read the opening section, I knew that I was hooked. Robert Leonhard writes, he said, "The priorities found in doctrinal manuals in schools, in combat units, and most important, the souls of our leaders often appeared to be aimed at destroying rather than defeating, at fighting fairly rather than stealing every possible advantage over the enemy. And this has got me, at pursuing perfection in method rather than obtaining decisive results." And I've sat through many MDMP sessions. I've sat through many AARs, and it always kind of hovers around the same thing. They'll talk about, it doesn't really matter if you won or lost, but did you follow the manual? Did you follow the book? Which to me, one person I heard say, well, at NTC, it's not about if you win or lose, but did you lose doctrinally? Well, that never set right with me. But as I read Art of Maneuver by Robert Leonhard, I was like, where does this guy get this stuff? It's like he identified everything I felt was wrong with how we have been fighting recently. And I was like, this guy, it was like, I really wanted to know where he came up with this. So in this book, he introduces maneuver warfare and the theory behind it. And then that'll be about the first half of it. In the second half, Robert Leonhard then critiques air-land battle and how it didn't go far enough to follow maneuver warfare theory. So I was like, well, where does maneuver warfare theory come from? Well, that led me to John Boyd. And John Boyd is the father of maneuver warfare. I'm trying to understand why people win or lose conflict, whether it be a fighter pilot or armies. So as I was trying to understand kind of more about John Boyd, I was kind of dissatisfied that I didn't learn too much about maneuver warfare in the School of Advanced Military Studies. Of course, this is 15-16, so we're just coming out of the Global War on Terror, and LISCO was just starting to get a little bit of traction. Anyway, I called a instructor of mine, and I was like, hey, how come we didn't learn more about maneuver warfare? And I remember on the phone, he tells me, well, I'll tell you why. Because John Boyd's an a-hole, that's why. Well, I didn't realize how much of John Boyd's caustic personality really had influence on how much of his ideas went. But anyway, so after I read Art of Maneuver, I was like, where does Robert Leonhard get this stuff? So I went to his bibliography. What I found is he gets a lot of his material from this book. It's called Race to the Swift by Richard Simpkin. Now, caution. You're going to read this book. One, it's hard to find because it's like out of print. Second thing, this is like a graduate level school on maneuver warfare. So he's going to talk about where the Germans of 1940s came up, go into deep battle, the Soviets, and airline battle. But he's going to use mathematics. So he'll talk about trying to prove maneuver warfare through physics.
So I think what you're saying, sir, is that West Point officers will have a leg up on any of the RTC or OCS.
You said that, not me. I like your plug on the. I'll let you get into that, not me. But this book really, this really took me to the next level.
Yes, sir.
Because he really talks about leverage. He talks about turning movements. He'll talk about simultaneity, and these words you'll recognize from our doctrine. But see, the problem with a lot of times when you see, we were talking about, hey, go read FM 3.0, go read doctrine. unless you understand where that stuff comes from, it doesn't have that resonance. It's just more words at you. But this really, I understood, oh, I see why turning movements are so powerful. I understand where the mental moral kind of comes from that we've been talking to the other videos. So Race to the Swift is really where Robert Leonhard references a lot of this. So Robert Leonhard, and then the other thing was, so John Boyd, one of the things that I talked with academics, one of their critiques of John Boyd is he never wrote a book. Now, that's very important in the terms of a lot of academics, is to write your theory in a book, let people critique it. Well, he never did it. If you go to YouTube, and I'm sure we can reference it, I've referenced in one video, but he when he lectured, he would lecture on slides. But the old school, I don't know, too many viewers remember this, but they used to have an overhead projector, and you'd have these transparent things, and he'd do that.
One, remember, even though we had the Napoleonic Revolution, which tended to pull these things apart, Napoleon later on reinstalled himself as emperor. Also, remember the period that both he, Clausewitz, and Germany came out of. They came out of the 18th century, the age of aristocracy, where they wanted to have adaptability at the top and regularity at the bottom.
This book is his slides. So when you read this book, it's basically a slideshow presentation that someone's finally put a book on it. And this is where he will lay out how armies win or lose. And then what he's trying to get to is that really you win or lose based on flexibility, rapidity, not being predictable, and basically always having a freedom of maneuver and that thing. So where does he come up with that? Well, the story of John Boyd is, if you read this book, he was a fighter pilot in the Korean War, and where he became interested was the American plane at the time. I can't remember which one it was, but it was not as fast, it wasn't quite as capable as aircraft as the Soviet aircraft. But the American pilots seemed to outperform the Soviet pilots, even though their aircraft was somewhat inferior. So that kind of led him to understand why. And what he kind of came up with is two key things, is the canopy for the American pilot plane was larger, so that pilot could see around better. The Soviet was less, and also the American plane had more agile or more responsive hydraulics, so it could turn quicker. Okay. And this is where this embryonic idea of you win or lose based on someone's who can observe, who can understand the conditions, decide and act. And that's where you'll hear the OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, and act. People have made it all overly simplistic, but that's kind of where he came from. Then he became, later on he taught at the Air Force version of Top Gun called Red Flag. And then he did quite well there, and he wrote the Air Force Tactics Manual. Okay. And then he later on goes and develops the F-15, F-16, controversially, because he kind of stole computer power, whatever. But later on, the end of his life, he becomes so passionate trying to understand how armies win or lose. After he retires, he works at the Pentagon for $1 a month, and he just goes on this circuit teaching maneuver warfare. But anyway, that's where that comes from. Then, so key people is Robert Leonhard, Art of Maneuver, Richard Simpkin, who's passed away. Theory is this book, the Maneuver Warfare Handbook, written by William Lynn. So William Lynn is the person that really codified maneuver warfare in one small document. Notice it's small, so everyone reads it. And what I think it's important is the U.S. Army, kind of that 1980s, and the Marines, they were going through they were reeling from losing,
right.
Vietnam, and
Yes,
they were
sir.
really looking for answers. And so there was kind of this vigorous effort to not do that again. Well, and so this kind of effort for a lot of these officers really took to maneuver warfare as an answer to fight outnumbered and win. William Lynn really kind of put that together in this book, Maneuver Warfare Handbook. Interesting that when Air-Land Battle 1983 is the first version, then 86 will be the second version. That a lot of it. This is a lot of, if you're watching this and you're a doctrinista or you're an academic, this is where people get, that's not true at all. Air-Land Battle is highly influenced by maneuver warfare. In fact, that's what Robert Leonhard is going to talk about. He's going to lay out maneuver warfare, then he's going to lay out Air-Land Battle and say it didn't go far enough. Well, the Army kind of dipped their toe in it, but they'll resist and say it's not true. But the Marine Corps went all chips in. So like I was telling you earlier, on Clausewitz's book on war, sure. John Boyd, had his copy, and it's all written up and tagged up from John Boyd going through it. It's like, I haven't seen it myself, but what I'm told, it's like under a shrine almost in Quantico. And all the Marines have to pay homage to it. And so then what the Marine Corps did, my opinion, and I'm right,
Well, you're the brigade commander, sir, of course.
the best tactics manual written is MCDP 1.3, the Marine Corps Tactics Manual, 1997. So I've learned more about tactics in this small book. Notice it's thin again, so people read it. In this book than probably any other book. So I recommend. That's my first thing I do with my company commanders and everybody is read this book, read it and reread it and reread it. But this book really came from my understanding of an aggregate of all of this. Then lastly, this book is influential because this is the anthology. You'll notice a who's who. So in this book, you have chapters written by William Lind. We'll introduce it. Then you've got John Antal, who, if you haven't watched, he's all over, written many books. He was a retired colonel. He's still on. In fact, he's coming to our Maneuver Warfare Symposium to speak. Robert Leonhard writes a section. Sure. Dave Grossman writes in here, which you recognize from On Killing and On Combat. He writes a section, but here's a really good place if you want to know about Maneuver Warfare Anthology. So there's that. So there's others, but these have been the key books that's really kind of shaped my passion for maneuver warfare. Again, was started with Art of Maneuver, then went to Race to the Swift, and then really getting Maneuver Warfare Handbook, and then I think that all kind of culminated with this tactics manual. And so, as I'm referencing maneuver warfare, and you go on your own journey, I would recommend it. You can get this on Amazon. It's not that expensive. Art of Maneuver. I'd start there. In fact, when I was in Battle Group Poland, I made all my officers read this one, and then the rest of them, a little harder to come by. But if you want, I'll definitely help you get copies of it.
Yes, sir. Well, it looks like I have some homework, so I'm going to get right after it. But I appreciate you take time. I just want to say to the audience, 11 years in the Army, I never heard of any of these books. Maybe that one. Until I met you. So I appreciate, or John Boyd. I'd heard about OODA loop, but it was like, it was used in LPD, and we compared it to, I believe, Apple. It wasn't even related to maneuver, so appreciate you taking time to share that. And I remember the first time we ever met, you mentioned John Boyd, and I went on Wikipedia and read about this guy, and yeah, it's incredible how smart he was and just his life. So I appreciate you taking time to share these books, and I'll get after it, sir.
Yeah, and I guess I just offer that, we always misuse the word maneuver. So, right now, if you watch a lot of pundits talk about maneuver warfare is dead and all that, because they misuse it, and they say, in the Army, we talk about maneuver is movement combined with fires. But remember, that's in the physical sphere of war, right? So true, but that's kind of the white belt of looking at it. A more blue belt way of looking at it, that maneuver warfare is trying to get behind the enemy to create shock. It's trying to get into the moral sphere of war. Now, the black belt way, and I got this from Jim Greer, who'll be speaking at the Maneuver Warfare Symposium.
Sir, who else you got coming to this? Jim Matt?
Try. Anyway, is maneuver warfare, what it's always meant to be, is you get inside the mind of your enemy and take him apart from the inside out. That's maneuver warfare in a nutshell. The most succinctly I've ever heard it put is maneuver warfare is getting inside the mind of your enemy or opponent and taking him or her apart from the inside out. And then and that requires you to master them in the physical, the moral, and the mental sphere of war. And that's why I introduced all that stuff, because again, if you're just fighting in the physical sphere, then everyone's just doing the same. They're shooting, moving in that one, but they're forgetting where 2/3 of warfare resides, yes, the mental, the moral. And that's where defeat lies. And when you read Robert Leonhard, that's what he's going to talk about, is you defeat your enemy in the mental and moral sphere, because you just can't kill your way to victory. And we keep trying, but not yet.
Yes, sir.
And I'm passionate because I'm an Afghan vet, and I don't think that went very well. So we've got to do better as an officer corps. We got to do better as an Army. So, and I think I'm convinced this is where that happens.
Yes, sir. All right. Well, thank you, sir. Yep. And make sure you like and subscribe to our channel. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, sir.
You bet.